Okay, we're going to get started here. Welcome to Pirkei Avot with Imitate Torah. I'm your host, Darren Huckey, and we're going to get going here. This is part 3 of 6, Disciple Makers, Peacemakers, and World Shakers. We've had 2 lessons so far that have been really enjoyable. Again, we're just covering portions of Pirkei Avot, not the entire tractate. We're just going to have snippets of different things that I've pulled out to just have something to study and something to think about, things to ponder. I'm trying to get my people out of the way here so I can see the screen. So forgive me. Okay, so tonight's lesson again is Disciple Makers, Peacemakers, and World Shakers, and we have 3 more weeks, and we will be covering Avot chapter 1 verse 6 tonight, and also Mishnah 12. So we are going to get going here. So between our last class and tonight's class, there's a series of people that we have skipped over. So I was just going to go through those briefly and cover each of those just real quickly. Shimon Hatzadik is who we talked about last week. His disciple was Antigonus of Sochom, and one of the things that he is famous for is his disciples who went astray and formed the Sadducees and the Boethusians because they misunderstood his teachings. And then we have something unusual that begins happening here. We see this pattern. Yossi ben Yoezer of Tzareda and Yossi ben Yochanan of Jerusalem are the disciples of Antigonus, that the ones that aren't do not become heretical. And then they disciple Yehoshua, the son of Perachia, and Imitate, the Arbalite. Now, these guys are what are known as zugot. These become known as the pairs. From that point forward, from Yossi ben Yoezer of Tzareda and Yossi ben Yochanan of Jerusalem forward until the time that these basically, I wouldn't say end, but the time of the early teachers come to an end. They are listed in pairs, and they are called zugot. A zugot just simply means pairs, and they are generally known as the Nasi and the Avbekdim, basically the president of the Sanhedrin and the basically the head of the court. And they function together, and they sort of balance each other out. And we'll see that more when we come to later pairs. The most famous being Hallel and Shammai. We're going to talk about those guys tonight. And so we have come to our first saying, and this is from Yehoshua, the son of Perachia, and Imitate, the Arbalite. Yehoshua is the first one. He says, "Make for yourself a teacher, acquire for yourself a friend, and judge every man on the scale of merit." Okay, so these are the 3 things. And so Yehoshua, the son of Perachia, he is thought to have lived roughly between 140 BCE and 100 BCE. And a couple of things he's known for is, one, he was a Pharisee, one of the earliest Pharisees. And he was also persecuted by this guy you may have heard of, John Hyrcanus, who was in the line of the Maccabees. He was a Hasmonean, and by the time his reign came into being, he was reigning, he was the king, everything was corrupted. The Hasmonean line was corrupt, and all this kind of stuff. And so he became a persecutor of the Pharisees, and there's some stuff recorded in the Talmud about him and some things. And another thing about Yehoshua that's interesting is there's possibly, some people think that this is the case, that he has some negative things to say about Yeshua in the Talmud recorded. There's problems with that because, first of all, look at the timeline. He was about 150 years prior to Yeshua. And the other things is that there's certain things that don't match up. And so he's talking about a heretic by the name of Yeshu. And there's been people that have shown that this is not who he's talking about. He's not talking about Yeshua. So just keep that in mind. So let's keep this going and talk about the things that he said. He said, make for yourself a teacher. Now, this is interesting language. Let me grab my stuff here so I can be prepared. Because he doesn't say, why not, he doesn't say get for yourself a teacher. Get yourself a teacher. Why doesn't he say get yourself a teacher? This is language that expresses a certain sentiment, a certain concept, okay, that we're going to talk about tonight. And so this is the make for yourself a teacher. What is up with that? Because it literally it's aseh is the Hebrew verb that he uses, and it means to make. It means to do. It doesn't mean to acquire or get or something like that. Okay. So several translations translate this as provide for yourself a teacher, but as I said, the Hebrew literally says to make or even create for yourself a teacher. So how do we accomplish this? How do we make a teacher for ourselves? Sometimes we have to make teachers of those who have potential before they officially accept the role upon themselves. We must attach ourselves to them and press them with questions, thoughts, and opinions which will inspire them to investigate and to deliver a response. Sometimes we also must financially undergird them, relieving at least a portion of their financial strain so that they have the needed time to study and to teach. Committing to a teacher through financial support not only strengthens his dedication to spiritual pursuits, but it also gives him the freedom to invest back into those who are encouraging his commitment. So part of the reason why I am who I am today is because people have done that for me in my life. They've encouraged me by asking questions. They've come to me just knowing that I've studied and asked certain things, and I've had to dig and learn other things. They have supported me financially in certain ways, supported me in my ministry at Met Torah, and it's given me the ability to become a teacher, because I without that, I would have been studied, I would have been knowledgeable, but I wouldn't have been a teacher. And so it's the investment of others when they force somebody basically into a position of becoming a teacher that helps them to grow into who Hashem wants them to be. And so I'm sure there's people in your life that you can think of, hey, I look to them for such and such, or, they're knowledgeable in this, or I think they would be an excellent teacher or whatever. I would encourage you to invest in them somehow, whether it is with your time and just asking them questions or helping them to step up to the plate, investing them financially to help them not have to rely so much on the secular work that they can't study and so forth. I would encourage you to invest in the people that can be a teacher for you, okay? According to Avot Rabbi Natan, this is, again, the early sort of version of Pirkei Avot with a extensive commentary, which is really nice, that I rely on quite heavily. We'll be talking a lot about it and actually reading from it a lot tonight. It says, this teaches us that one should provide himself with a single teacher and study with him scripture and Mishnah, Midrash, Halakha, and Agada. Thus the man remains in one place and is filled with good and blessing. Okay, so according to this, what should happen is you should find somebody that's knowledgeable in these different areas that will make you a well-rounded student, and you attach yourself to him where he can give you all of this stuff, and you don't have to be bouncing around from here to there, this person to that person, and get conflicting, interpretations and conflicting things and stuff like that. And you have basically a one-stop shop to give you the things that you need to make you a well-rounded individual and to help you become the person Hashem wants you to be, okay? And so it's a good thing here. The next thing is, according to Brad Young, he says the master teacher, this is how he's describing a teacher like this. The master teacher was a mentor whose purpose was to raise up disciples who would not only memorize his teachings, but also live out the teachings in practical ways, okay? And so the disciple seeks out the person he wants to emulate, not somebody that's just has good head knowledge or has good theology or whatever, okay? Or is smart or is studied. You want a person that you can actually look up to, that you can imitate, that you can emulate, because that's the purpose. I mean, head knowledge is one thing, but a life is something completely and entirely different. And we want to be disciples of people who live their faith. Now, caveat with this is, and I didn't put this in your notes, I just wanted to interject it real quick, is that Yeshua, there's a lot of times people bring up this whole thing of Yeshua telling us not to be called rabbi, teacher, father, etc. And so people interpret that ways to mean that I should not attach myself to another person in the form of a mentor or a rabbi. But really what he's saying is that whereas the rabbis, especially in his day, they would raise up disciples to emulate themselves only, we are to raise up disciples that will not only emulate us, but primarily emulate Yeshua. Okay, Yeshua is the ultimate teacher, because Paul, remember, he tells his disciples in his letter, and I forget it, maybe it's to the congregation at Corinth, but he says, imitate me as I imitate Messiah. Okay, and too many times, especially within Christian circles and things like this, it just breaks my heart every time I hear it, is we have this concept: don't imitate me because I'm going to fail you. Don't imitate me because I'm nothing. Don't imitate me because I am a failure. I can't do anything right. I'm a sinner. I'm a blah, blah, blah. And they say, just look to Yeshua, to Jesus. And this shouldn't be the case. We should be a living, breathing, walking replication in miniature of Yeshua in our lives, and not pawn off that responsibility and not negate that responsibility and not live up to that responsibility as much as possible. Will we fail? Of course, but that shouldn't be the focus. The focus should be the successes. And so Lance, did you not hear that? Or are you just giving a big shout amen there? So Lance said amen. Say it again, brother. So go ahead.
I was just gonna say that is a true statement. We have to be people that people will be able to emulate in our practice, not just in our word. That's such a great point. I'm glad you brought it out.
Yep. So this is a critical component. And it's not just teachers, and this is the reason why I say this, because there's been studies done, and the last time I checked, which was many years ago, it's on the average 8 people are looking to you as an example in some area. Okay, and so when we don't live up to that, we start a chain reaction of meltdown, breakdown, and so forth. And so we have to live lives of integrity. We have to live lives that people want to emulate. And so even if we're not, quote, a teacher or whatever, we need to live lives of integrity that people will want to emulate, that people should emulate, because somewhere along the road, someone is going to want to imitate you. And that's going to be for the good, or that's going to be for the bad. And we need to make it for the good. Okay? So what does it mean to attach yourself to a teacher? Because we live in the West, we have this, probably you would call it an aversion maybe, to authority, to leadership, to mentoring and stuff like that. I mean, we might get a business mentor or something to that nature, but as far as spiritual mentor, we generally buck at the idea because we don't want anybody, quote, leading us astray. And we have all these excuses we make. We live in a generation and a culture where we're what I call wise in our own eyes, and that's a quote from Proverbs, in that we simply believe we can't be taught by others. We're self-made, we're self-taught, and also we're self-destructive. If we're serious about the path of discipleship, however, we need to seek out those who will guide us both in our studies and in our applications. I was just reading this week, I'm trying to think what it was. It was a commentary. I can't remember who it was, if it was the Ramban or someone else, but anyway, they were commenting on the difference between learning through books and learning through a teacher, and that they said there's just worlds apart. Okay, worlds apart. Oh, and the specific thing they do address is that books and reading and learning teaches you what to do, whereas a real live human being teacher teaches you what not to do. Okay, he can give you examples, he can give you the life lessons of how to avoid the pitfalls and so forth. We need someone whom we can look to for guidance, who has walked the path before us and succeeded. Providing a teacher for oneself is not an easy task, but it will help us grow exponentially. And I'll try to do this without getting emotional. I'm in a relationship right now with my rabbi that I've never had before, and it's just an amazing place to be. That I've always sought after mentorship. I've always sought after someone to invest into me, and I have that now, and it's there's nothing like it. It's amazing to be under that leadership and to have somebody that genuinely cares about me and enough to correct me and enough to encourage me and cheer me on and all that kind of stuff. It's amazing. The responsibility of a Torah teacher is to pour into his students a great wealth of knowledge and provide a living example for his students on how to properly live out the mandates of Torah. We should endeavor to attach ourselves to one who can pour into us the wisdom that only comes through experience rather than theory. And there's a big difference here, okay? So we attach ourselves or make ourselves a teacher, and then we acquire ourselves a friend. Now, another little caveat in this, there's a lot of different interpretations for this, make for yourself a teacher, and one of the more obscure minor thoughts on this is that, make yourself a teacher. When there's not a teacher, do whatever it takes to gain something where you are being fed, you are being taught, even if there's nobody around you. The books are going to have to do, the internet's going to have to do, but do whatever it takes to be in a position to be teachable and to be learning and to be changing and to growing and to developing. And even the minor interpretation is make yourself a teacher. Okay, make yourself into a teacher. And so why does this say acquire for yourself a friend? Okay, I mean, the actual literal Hebrew, it says uknei lecha chaver, literally, which means purchase for yourself a friend. Purchase for yourself a friend? I mean, what's up with that? Am I going to go buy my friends? I mean, that sounds like desperation there, right? So how are we supposed to interpret this? Because it seems a little odd, okay? And here's something even more weird, in my opinion, that Yeshua says something very similar, and it's just as obscure. He says, for the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. And this is in the context of the parable of the dishonest manager. He says, and I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth. Make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. It's like, whoa, what in the world is going on with that? That's some weird stuff. Would Yeshua really say that? Okay. So what does it mean to purchase for yourself a friend? And I wish we had the time to go back into Yeshua's teaching and everything and go on that. But let's just talk about what it means to purchase for yourself a friend. The word kana in this spelling, there's different words that sound the same, is used dozens of times in the Hebrew scriptures with the intent of purchasing. Okay. Are we literally supposed to purchase someone to be our friend? Of course not. But we have to realize that this text is giving us a precedent. It's describing the importance of a chaver, a friend. Okay, this isn't just an acquaintance. Okay, this is a friend, a close confidant, and a study partner. It's stressing the fact that we should go to whatever means possible to establish this relationship, even if it appears to be, quote, buying the friendship or the relationship. For example, you could invite a friend out to a local coffee shop and study and offer to buy him coffee and a bagel. You could invite somebody to your house and provide food for him during the study. You could offer to mow his yard, paint his house, or babysit his kids. While all these may sound like bribery, we do it all the time to get people out of their comfort zones and into a healthy environment. Well, why not use these same techniques for our own benefit if it will help us to establish a relationship built around study and application of the Torah? Okay. Sometimes people just need that extra boost to push them into that relationship where they may be a little reserved. Okay. And so if you encourage them, if you give them a little bit of incentive, it's going to help them maybe get over a little bit, even a personal issue where it's they may be a little shy or whatever. Okay. They need that little oomph. Lance, did you have a question? Lance Hamill.
I was just going to make a statement about the fact that Proverbs says that in order to have a friend, one must be friendly. So to offer up your own friendship to someone is considered as a gift to them, that you may reach out to someone through your friendship that you may otherwise not have befriended any other way.
Excellent. Very good. Very good. Thank you. Avot the Rebbe Natan also says this about the benefits of a Torah study partner. He says that when two sit studying Torah and one of them makes a mistake in a matter of halacha, this is Jewish law, legal, understanding of things, or a chapter heading, basically they misunderstand the context of the topic or whatever. It says of the unclean, this basically they misinterpret to mean to understand something to be unclean when it's really clean, or clean that it's really unclean, or of the forbidden that it's actually permitted, or the permitted that it's actually forbidden. His companion will correct him. And where do we hear that when his companion corrects him and studies with him, they will be well rewarded for their labor? It is said in Ecclesiastes 4:9, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. Okay, so 2 are better than 1. This is basically, you need somebody to have your back. You need somebody to help you and set course correction and so forth. Okay, it's very easy for us to do, and especially in this Western Americanized society, to just do things John Wayne style, all alone. We do it all the time, and so many of us are doing that and being guilty of that. And it's not like a wicked thing, but it's something that traps us and limits us. It leaves us lacking. We are not by nature a communal people. We've not been raised that way. And we really need to change that within the body of Messiah. We need to be communally minded. We need to be attached to other believers, to others that can lift us up when we're down, that can share the sorrows with us, that can can multiply the joys with us and so forth. We need those people in our lives, and it's very, very important, especially in the area of study, because if you're studying with a group of people or a certain person, it's encouraging. It helps you to be a better student and a better disciple and so forth. We have a group of guys that we study Sunday through Friday with online every morning. Go through the Torah portion every day. We have a men's group that we study certain things with every couple of weeks, and different things. I've got personal friends that we study. We were just Lance Slater's on here. I was just over at his house on Shabbat, just hanging out, having a good time. So, but we studied some texts to make use of our time and to learn some Torah together, right? So we should be doing this all the time, but we need to have somebody that we can rely on, that we can have that wrestling match, that pupil, that back and forth and wrestling. How is this text being interpreted? Am I interpreting it right? Are we interpreting it right? Are we looking at it right? And so forth. We need to have that relationship. Okay. Avot the Rabbi Natan also says this particular passage teaches that a man should get a companion for himself to eat with him, drink with him, study scripture with him, study Mishnah with him, sleep with him, basically just be that comfortable where you guys can hang out and stay in each other's places and stuff, and reveal to him all his secrets, the secrets of the Torah and the secrets of worldly things. We had a men's group last night, and it was an environment where the guys know each other to the point of we can now break down some barriers. We can be honest with one another. We talked about some very difficult topics last night. We talked about some things that were revealing, things that were personal, and the things that we don't want to talk to the world about. But it was a good, because we knew each other's heart. It was a protective environment. It was a safe environment, and we need people in our lives like this. Okay, we're going on to our next part of this, which is judge every man on the scale of merit. What in the world does that mean? Scale of merit. Okay. Scale of merit, if you think about it this way, you think about the old balancing scales, you would have you'd have your standard weight on one side, then you would have whatever you're weighing on the other side. And you would have those and see which way it would go, and see if it was lighter or heavier and so forth. And so when the scale of merit, when we're talking about the scale of merit in this, basically if somebody is right there on the edge, or has a if you're wondering whether they're going to measure up or whatever, you do whatever it takes to add something to their side to let that scale pull down in their favor. Okay. I'm thinking we had an instance not too long ago. It's like, why did so-and-so do this? And at first we were talking, and it's like, that seems to be upsetting. Seems like they shouldn't have been doing that. Then we got to thinking, it's like, okay, well, this could have happened, and this could have happened, and this could have happened. Trying to look and judge on the scale of merit and make it a situation where something that we would have wanted people to do for us if it were in the same light. Okay. And we looked at it, and it's like, well, now that makes sense. That's probably what happened. And so we were able to work through a situation instead of being offended. We should judge every person favorably. Okay, here's some examples. I'm going to read some from Avot the Rabbi Natan, and this is an example. Let me turn to this real quick. That it may seem a little out there, but it's meant to be, because it gets the point across. Okay. All right, 6 here. Okay, this is commenting on this passage. It says there was an incident involving a certain young girl who was captured, and 2 pious men went after her to ransom her. At one point during their attempts to free her, one of them entered the house of harlots, the house of ill repute, where the girl was being held. When he emerged, he said to his colleague, what did you suspect of me? Basically, what did you think about me going into that place that I normally shouldn't go into? And his friend replied, he said, I thought that perhaps you entered in order to determine how much money she was being held for, so that we would know how much to raise in order to ransom her. And the first man replied, by the divine service, so it was. And then he said, just as you have judged me favorably, so shall the Holy One, blessed is he, judge you favorably. Okay? And so it could have looked at that situation and said, he's just taking advantage of the situation. He's doing something that he shouldn't do, right? And we would have looked on it as bad. But his friend judged favorably, and it turned out to be the right thing, and he was blessed because he judged favorably. Okay? Now, we've heard something similar to this in a few different passages in the apostolic scriptures. First of all, Paul in Romans 14 says, why do you pass judgment on your brother? Or why do you despise your brother? For we will all stand before the judgment seat of God. For it is written, as I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to God. So then each of us will give an account of himself to God. Remember, I emphasize this, himself. We are not going to have to give account for other people. We're going to have to give an account for ourselves. Okay, and that's something we need to keep in mind. Another passage you guys are well familiar with, James 4, do not speak evil against one another, brothers. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks against the law, against the Torah, right? And judges the Torah. But if you judge the Torah, you're not a doer of the Torah, but a judge. There's only one lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? Okay? So James is saying, this isn't right. Hashem is the judge. You shouldn't be in this position that you're putting yourself in. You need to get out of that seat. Here's a passage from the Talmud, Tractate Shabbat. Our rabbis taught, he who judges his neighbor in the scale of merit is himself judged favorably. That sounds very familiar as well. Sounds like something our master taught. Judge not, that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounced, you will be judged. And with the measure you use it, will be measured to you. Okay, basically, it's this way. If you want to be judged favorably, then you need to judge other people favorably. If you want a harsh judgment, then judge people harshly. Go for it. But that's the same measure that you're going to be measured with. It's called midah keneged midah, okay, in the Hebrew. This is measure for measure. That which a man sows, he will also reap. And so if we want to be judged with leniency, if we want to be judged with mercy, if we want to be judged with kindness, with optimism, and so forth, then that's the way we need to be looking at other people and judging them and thinking the best of them. This is a very difficult thing for some people to do. Some people are built with a criticism, a critical spirit. I have worked and worked and worked to overcome a critical spirit, a spirit of cynicism in my life for years. And it's my natural tendency to look on other people with suspicion, with cynicism, with criticism and so forth. And I have to constantly be on the lookout for that. And Hashem has given me the ability now to naturally begin looking at people that way. Okay. And so because he's working in my life to do these things. We're going to move on to the next Mishnah. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding what we talked about, regarding judging or anything we talked about this, acquiring a teacher, purchasing yourself a friend, judging favorably? Okay, we will move forward here. Okay, so in between these next two Mishnayot, we have another series of leaders, disciples, and teachers, Zugot, pairs. We have Yehoshua, the son of Perachia, and the Arbelites, where we left off. And then they pass it on to Judah ben Tavai and Shimon ben Shatach. And then they pass it on to Shemaiah and Avtalion. Okay, you've heard of Hallel and Shammai probably. Shemaiah and Avtalion, they're just about as famous, and we're going to talk about one story about Hallel that's going to bring these two guys into the picture. But the ones that we're concerned with right now are Hallel and Shammai. We're going to be talking about the teaching, this particular teaching of Hallel. I'm going to give you some background on Hallel and Shammai for those of you who may not know or may know a little bit. So Hallel and Shammai received from them, okay? So Hallel would say, this is what he would say. This is one of my favorite things. Be disciples of Aaron. Be of the disciples of Aaron. A lover of peace, a pursuer of peace, one who loves the creatures and draws them close to Torah. Okay, this is Avot 112. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Hallel and Shammai. Okay, Hallel was a Babylonian Jew that immigrated to Haaretz, to the land of Israel, and he worked his way up from a nobody, basically. He was a wood chopper and a nobody, and he made his way to the position of the Nasi, the head of the Sanhedrin, okay, and became one of the Zugot along with Shammai. There's a story told about his origins. So let me see which ones I've planned on talking about here. And so his origins, of one of the most famous stories about him and his basically his start of learning, is that he was, like I said, an immigrant. He was poor. He was a wood chopper. He didn't. He barely made enough money to survive. And back during that day, according to this account, the Beit Midrash, the study hall, was a place that was basically for the elite. Okay, only the educated could enter, and as a matter of fact, you had to pay to get in and study. Okay, it was a paid thing that you had to pay a certain amount of money to be able to even enter into the hall. Okay, and so he would work all day, finally get enough money for entrance into the study hall and maybe a morsel to eat, and then he would enter into the study hall and study as much as he could until night, and then he would go home, sleep for a little bit, and get up the next morning and repeat again. Okay. One day in the winter, he didn't earn enough money to be able to both eat and get into the study hall, and so he barely got by on eating. He may not even eaten that day, I don't know, but he definitely didn't have money for the study hall, and so he decided that he was going to try to listen in from the outside and try to gain some Torah knowledge by that method. And so there was this thing akin to a skylight that was towards the top of the study hall, and he climbed up there and he stuck his face to it, trying intently to listen and to gain as much Torah knowledge as he could. Down below him were the scholars of his day, Avtalion and Shemaiah. Okay, these are the two guys that he received from. But at that point, they weren't necessarily his disciples. I mean, his mentors. And so he was listening intently, and it began to snow. He was so involved in listening and learning that he didn't realize it was snowing. Okay, the snow just unusually fell. It fell in droves and just piled up, and eventually covered him, and he passed out because of the cold. And when I think it was getting morning light or whatever, and they expected sun, they didn't have any sun, and they looked to the skylight and they saw this man basically frozen at the top of the study hall. They rushed outside to help him. Now, this happened on a Friday afternoon, Friday evening, and then went into all the Shabbat and Shabbat morning. And Avtalion and Shemaiah, they exerted effort to get him down. They brought him inside. They cooked food. They boiled a soup or whatever. They made a fire to heat him and everything on Shabbat so as to preserve his life. And this is, I think, one of the reasons we have the whole dichotomy of Hallel and Shammai, where Hallel is more lenient and Shammai is more strict. I think this may all stem back to Hillel's this act that actually saved his life, that he learned from his teachers of how that life, the preservation of life, the dignity of life supersedes the restrictions of Shabbat. And this became his sort of path that he would lead and teach his disciples, okay? And so Hillel was known to be an incredibly patient man, okay? And so there's a saying from Tractate Shabbat, is also in Avot the Rebbe Natan. It says, let a man be always humble and patient like Hillel and not strict like Shammai. He was a model for others. Okay, so let's talk about the patience of Hillel for a moment. And again, I'm pulling from Avot the Rebbe Natan, and this is a story of Hillel's patience. I'm going to skip over some of this because it's a little lengthy. It says, what is an example of the humility of Hillel the elder? And talking about his patience, basically, but they use the word humility. They said, it once happened that two people got up and made a wager with each other for 400 zuz. Evidently, that was a lot of money at the time. They said to one another, whichever one of us goes and provokes Hillel to anger shall take the 400 zuz. Okay, so one of them went to try and provoke Hillel. It says one of them went, and it was on a Friday when dark was approaching. It was on the Erev Shabbat, and the Shabbat was approaching. And Hillel was in the middle of washing his hair in preparation for the Shabbat that was soon to begin. The man came and knocked on the door of Hillel's house and called out, where is Hillel? Where is Hillel? Thinking that some emergency was at hand, Hillel interrupted his washing, and he wrapped himself in his cloak and went out to meet him. Now, one version I'd heard said he was actually in the bath, some sort of, we would say a bathtub or something. And he said, he went out to meet him and he said, my son, what do you need? He replied, I need to ask you this question that I have. Hillel said to him, tell me your question. The man said to him, why is it that the eyes of the people from Talmud are especially round? Real important question, right? Hillel answered, because they live among the sands of the desert, and the winds come and blow the sand into their eyes, and that's why their eyes are round. The man left and waited for a time until he was sure that Hillel had resumed washing. He again knocked on the door. And he goes through these series of questions. He asks him the next question. Hillel answers this question. He says, thank you. Hillel goes back, starts washing again. He waits. He knocks on the door, starts screaming, hey, where's Hillel? I need a question answered. He does this 3 or 4 times, okay? And at the end of this, it says, unable to provoke the humble Hillel, he said to him in frustration, you have made me lose 400 zuz. Hillel responded, it is fitting that you should lose the 400 zuz rather than Hillel losing his temper, okay, or his patience. And so this is a great story. I love this story, and it reminds me how much I fall short in this, and how much further that I have to go. Hillel is a great example. We also have the strictness of Shammai, and let me turn to it and give you this example. This is a classic example here. It once happened that a certain non-Jew was passing by the rear of a synagogue and heard a child reading aloud the verse, these are the vestments that they shall make, a breastplate, an ephod, and a robe, a tunic, a box-like knit, a turban, a sash, etc. Exodus 28:4. The man therefore came before Shammai and related to him the verse that he had overheard, and said to him, my teacher, all of this great honor and wealth, all of this great honor, and of wearing such lavish vestments, to whom is this given? He's heard about all this stuff. He's like, okay, who gets this kind of stuff, this amazing stuff? Shammai answered, It is given to the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who stands and performs the service upon the altar. Okay. Hearing this, the man said, why don't you convert me to Judaism on condition that you have me appointed as the Kohen Gadol? Annoyed by this brazen request, Shammai replied, is there no one Kohen among the people of Israel? And do we not have Kohanim Gadolim who can stand and serve in the high priesthood? Except for a simple convert who comes into the Jewish people with no more than his staff and his sack, and he would think that he can come and serve in the high priesthood? Okay. Shammai censured him for his brazenness and sent him away disapprovingly. Okay. He came to Hallel after that. Same question. On the condition you convert me on the condition that you make me the high priest, that I become the high priest, basically. Hillel said, okay, we can do this. And the man was like, hey, wow, really? Serious? And he goes, okay, let's do it. And so he converted him. He says, you know, the high priest has a lot of responsibility. So you need to start studying the laws of the high priest. And the man, he said, okay. And they start studying. And after who knows how long, days, weeks, months, whatever, of studying the laws of the high priest, he came across a passage that said he had to be of the line of Aaron. And he's like, okay, wait. Why didn't you tell me this at the beginning? He says, because you wouldn't have converted. He says, well, you're right. And he said, that was wise of you. But I'm glad I did convert. Now I realize that I can't be the high priest, but I'm happy, you know? And so Hillel went about things totally different than Shammai. And so he had a lot of patience, and that patience led to his students loving him and following in his footsteps, okay? So it starts off that we want to be disciples of Aaron. What does that mean, okay? I mean, what does it mean to be a disciple of Aaron? I mean, we're really not told a whole lot about him in the scriptures. We hear about some things that he's done. You know, God, you know, designates him as the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. The Lord speaks to him and Moses and so forth. And hang on one second here. Maybe you guys can see my screen there. Sorry about that. Okay, so be disciples of Aaron. What does this mean? So let me go back here and ask the question, what does this mean? The scriptures don't give us a whole lot of information about Aaron, his character, and so forth. But we do have this passage right here in Psalm 133. It says, behold how good and how pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity. I mean, we know the song. I mean, we sing it and so forth. It says it's like the precious oil on the head, running down on the beard of Aaron, running down on the collar of his robes. This unity among brothers. It's like this oil. What in the world? What does that mean? So the sages bring down from story after story after story after giving down a tradition and so forth about Aaron. There's stories that have been passed down from Aaron that aren't recorded in the scriptures. And Aaron was known as a peacemaker, okay? He is known as the peacemaker. As a matter of fact, there's a story, again, in the rabbinic time that I would like to read. This is one of my favorite stories in this, and it's about Aaron and how he would make peace between brothers that were at odds with one another. It says if two people were quarreling, Aaron would go seat himself next to the one of them and say to him, my son, do you see what the other fellow is saying in private? In other words, do you know what your brother is doing while you're you're at odds with him and not speaking to him? It says he's beating his chest and he's tearing his clothes in remorse and saying, "Woe is me! How will I lift my eyes and look at my friend in the face? I'm embarrassed to face him, for I'm the person that was in the wrong. I did wrong." Okay? And then Aaron would remain seated to him, next to him, talking in this manner until this man would entirely remove the resentment he had against his friend. Okay? He would take it completely out of his heart. And then, sneaky Aaron, he would go to the other person and say, "Guess what your brother's doing right now? He's over there beating his chest, tearing his clothes, saying how awful a person he is and how everything that happened was his fault. And he can't even face you. He doesn't have the dignity to even look you in the eye, okay? He's so sorry about what he did to you, okay?" And he would do that. And to the other person, they would have they would not harbor any resentment in their heart at all, okay? And it says when the two that were at odds with one another would just be walking as they're in their day-to-day lives, they'd meet each other on the street. They wouldn't even have to say the word. They'd just embrace one another and begin weeping, that they loved each other so much. All of this because of Aaron's ability to be the peacemaker. I mean, it sounds, maybe not exactly honest by our standards, but this is the way to make peace. Yeshua said this: "Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its saltiness, how will you make it salty again?" Now, it says this in Matthew and Luke in the context of disciples, right? And he does here again, but in this instance, he adds this verse in Mark that's really bizarre. "Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another." Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another. What in the world does this mean? I'm going to read real quick from this commentary from Daniel Lancaster. Got the wrong book. Hold on just a second here. It says, this may be an extension of the previous saying. Basically, if the salt loses its saltiness, how will you make it salty again? Perhaps the Apostle Paul alluded to this saying of the Master when he said, "Let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person." This is in Colossians 4:6. In other words, a person should always be careful with his words, seasoning his conversation with kindness and gentleness, so as not to cause an offense, which might bring discord. Okay? I think that's a great lesson there. Actually, we just did that. And so we have this famous teaching of our Master that we are well aware of. He quotes, I believe this may be quoted from the Psalms, Proverbs. It says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." Now, problem is, we don't know what it means to be peacemakers, okay? When we think of peacemakers, we think of people like Gandhi or somebody, right? A peacemaker, we often think of as, when we think of making peace, we think of being non-hostile. We think of being complacent, or what's the word I'm looking for? Basically passive. That's the word I'm looking for. We don't react, okay? But a peacemaker is more than that. A peacemaker is someone who is making peace, right? A peacemaker is someone who creates peace. It's not someone who lets peace happen, but someone who actually creates peace. And this is something that the rabbis talk about. This is the next phrase, that we should be disciples of Aaron. who pursue peace. And this is another passage in about the Rebbe Natan, and I'm going to read to this one more. Okay, so what does it mean to pursue peace? Not only love peace, but pursue peace. This teaches that a person should pursue making peace between each and every person. In the same way that Aaron pursued peace, making peace in Israel between each and every person. As it is stated, turn from evil and do good, seek peace and pursue it. Okay? And then the second part of this is Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, if a person sits quietly in his place, how is he then pursuing making peace in Israel between each and every person? Rather, he must even leave his place and go about to the larger world to pursue and make peace. As it is stated, seek peace and pursue it. How is this verse, which speaks of both seeking and pursuing, to be understood? Seek it from your place and pursue it, even if it takes you to another place. Okay? So we work to pursue peace in that we do things that are difficult in order to accomplish it. The last part of this that Hallel teaches us is that we are to be one who loves the creatures and draws them close to Torah. Okay? Draws them close to Torah. Now, these are paired together. Loves the creatures. When he talks about loving the creatures, he's not talking about ants and creepy crawlies. He's talking about people. Okay? And draws them, that's the creatures, close to the Torah. And we don't do this by being a Torah terrorist. Okay? What I mean by Torah terrorist means we are criticizing people, putting people down, telling them they're wicked, they're not following Torah, they're pagan, they're whatever. Okay? That's what I call a Torah terrorist, and it produces no fruit. Matter of fact, it produces negative fruit, black fruit, ugly fruit. Okay. Yes, thank you, Linda. And so we cannot abide in Yeshua and bear this ugly, ugly fruit. Okay, and believe me, I think we've probably all been there. We've probably all done it, especially when we came to a new realization of the validity of the Torah and so forth. It's easy for us to say, hey, we've been lied to, or, you know, all of this that I thought was right is now wrong, and flip on everybody. I had a friend of my parents actually contacted me recently and said that her daughter had recently been going to a Hebrew roots congregation, and it's turned her into basically a little nasty, ugly person that calls them pagans and doesn't want to be around them, and is continually criticizing them, being critical, and she didn't know what to do with it. She's basically like, this isn't what you do, so how do we deal with this? You know, she says, I see your stuff online, and even though you may be different, and I'm in the church and you're in this Messianic synagogue stuff, I can appreciate the things that you say and do. And my daughter is being just, you know, she's destroying the family, basically. And so it's not a good thing. It's a bad thing. We have to bear the fruit of righteousness. We have to do everything in love. And that's really what I want to end on. We've run out of time, but we're at our last slide. And I just want to leave you guys with this. We are supposed to be disciples of Abraham, who brought people into his tent and taught them love for the God, the one true God. We are to be like Aaron, who was a man of peace and who taught his disciples peace and how to make peace, even between husband and wife. And he taught his disciples that this is the path of peace. And Yeshua, who is the Prince of Peace. Amen. And so we are to love people into the kingdom, not debate them into the kingdom or criticize them into the kingdom. Okay. So I hope you got something out of it. We got a few minutes. If you'd like to comment, if you'd like to question, I'd love to hear your voices with anything that you have, any thoughts that you have before we sign off. Anyone?
Yeah, you know me, Darren. I can't be quiet for long.
I knew it.
Talking about peacemakers, that really just brought to mind where Shaul says in Romans chapter 12, he says, if it is possible,
Yes.
if it's humanly possible on your end, live peaceably with all men. Okay, he says, beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in doing so, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And it's just a great parallel to see the Jewishness of the text of the Brit Hadashah of the New Testament, because you've quoted several rabbis that talked about the exact same thing. So I love it when we can compare these texts and see the correlation of the rabbis and the writers of the New Testament to bring forth these very same ideas and interpretations of the Torah and whatnot.
Exactly. I mean, they were all there in the same family, in the same Jewish context, in the same religion. And so it's no wonder that we have so much overlap. And that's one of the reasons I love Pirkei Avot, is because the apostolic scriptures from, Matthew to Revelation, they don't necessarily deal with halakha, which most of the Jewish, the mainstream Jewish writings deal with, because their issue is the heart, and that's why I love Pirkei Avot, is because that's the main thing. It's dealing with the heart. It's dealing with matters of the heart. It's dealing with the ethics, so with how we treat people, how we live. And that's where you find a lot of this overlap between what the apostles and Yeshua taught and these rabbis taught.
Yeah, and see, that was something I never put two and two together, is that Yeshua's teaching was almost never halakhic. It was always agadah. It was agadic teaching, right. Never halakha.
Right. And there's such thing as halakhic agada. And so, halakhic midrash and things like that, which bring into, there's stories about rabbis, one teaches agada, one teaches halakha, and the people are flocking to the one who teaches agada. And he's like, I have the nuts and bolts of how, it's supposed to be lived out. Why are they all flocking to you? And, he basically, people can receive this because it's in their language and it's in terms that they can understand it. And it's in practical terms. It's not just the mechanics. So, okay, our time is up, guys. Thank you for being with me. And we will return same bat time, same bat channel next week to do part 4. I can't believe we're already past the halfway point here. So I appreciate you guys. Thanks for coming out, and we will see you next week. God bless.
Thanks, Darren. See you next time.
You are so welcome. Bye-bye.